The official estimate of the number of Sikhs killed has now risen to 1,000. Unofficial estimates put it many times higher, and the full horror of the onslaught on them is only now becoming clear. Thousands have sought protection in special camps, too frightened to go home. From one of these, Ken Rees has sent this report. It was filmed yesterday by an ITN crew, but delayed by an Indian government clampdown on satellite communications.
We travelled to a refugee camp outside Delhi. The police had strict orders not to let us in, despite pleas from some of the Sikhs inside. Eventually we did get in. It was a large college building, now home to thousands of terrified Sikhs living in squalor. They fled here from many miles around and told us stories of how they'd hid in places like drains and fields to avoid the rioting, before eventually reaching safety. This man was a victim of the riots who survived an attempt to burn him alive. His wife tries to comfort him. We saw many more like this who lived, but many died, and their widows were mourning today. You could not move in the courtyards without bumping into or tripping over people. Many were washing outside in gutters in the road. Sikhs place great store on cleanliness, and their religion calls for an uncut beard and long hair. Many had their heads shaved by the mobs. "You see, I used to look like this," said Mr. Puran Singh. His identity card showed a proud, bearded man. Now he has no beard and a shorn head. The government wants to destroy us, they told us. They were eager to talk about the situation.
We are homeless, we are familyless, and moreover, above all, no safety. We can't imagine how we'll survive ourselves in this India.
The camps are guarded by Indian troops and police. There are at least 3 in the Delhi area alone. At another, just 3 miles away, a food lorry had arrived. The Sikhs angrily told us that they themselves had arranged it. From the government, there's almost nothing, they said. And certainly we noticed a great shortage of food, water, and other essentials. Many of the Sikhs claimed the police had stood by and watched and even encouraged the rioting. And we ourselves had seen police look idly on during last week's anti-Sikh riots in Delhi. A relief worker in this camp showed us his list of dead and injured. He'd compiled it after talking to people in just one block. The list contained hundreds of names. We were told stories of dreadful horror. Mothers whose children had been killed wept as they spoke. This was the story of just one 6-year-old boy we met in the camp. Can you tell us what happened to this boy?
Petrol was sprinkled on him and set on fire.
He was set on fire? Why?
Because he is a Sardarji.
That's a Sikh?
Sikh.
Who would do such? His mother looked on. She was too dazed to speak.
Days after the killings, it was still the river, not the authorities, that bore away many of the bodies. Others were removed by the police, who are unsurprisingly sensitive about Trilokapuri.
Sorry, please.
Those who had survived were taken by the police to a refugee camp 5 miles away, which now holds 2,000 survivors of the massacres in East Delhi.
They burned the tire of this truck and put it in her neck and burnt alive. Her husband. And her son also. They pulled him from the house. In the hair they put kerosene oil and burnt alive. He ran and they threw stones on him and killed him.
Many seem to have had only the most basic medical attention, a smear of mercurochrome or ointment. But it was an organization of volunteers appalled at the atrocities who've organized the soup kitchens and emergency food centers and provided the medical supplies. And despite their efforts to provide food and clothing, both, we were told, were still in short supply. Relief centres like this one, run by the People's Unity Committee, an ad hoc group of volunteers, are overflowing with blankets, food and clothes, destined for Sikhs stranded in Gurdwaras or refugee camps. But however badly they may be needed, none of the supplies piling up in the relief workers' stores will meet the most urgent need of the survivors, the need for news. News of what happened to their brothers, sisters, parents or children from whom they became separated during the chaos of the massacres.
When these mobs turned down on them, there was just panic. So in certain cases, the men and the women have just run away from there to wherever they could find any space, leaving the children behind at times.
In the big refugee camps, the relay system can hardly keep pace with the piles of scribbled messages and appeals for missing relatives. In the whole of Delhi, relief workers estimate there may be as many as 20,000 people who've had no news of at least one close relative since the massacre. The task of tracking them down is all but impossible. There are 15,000 people listed as living at this one refugee camp alone. All are worried about going home, but many are even more worried about whether they'll ever see their missing relatives again.
My brother-in-law has been to Rishikesh for the cremation ceremony of my relatives over there. When he was coming back on the 1st of November by bus, he was caught at Loni border. And there were two persons, and both were Sikhs. Only two Sikhs were there in the bus. The mob was attacked. One was took by the 200 people and another was took by the 200 people. They were beaten up. We don't know what happened with them. And since 1st of the November, they are missing.
All his sons, they have been burned. And now only two daughters of her are missing now.
She's missing her two daughters?
Yes,
yes. How old are they?
Pardon?
How old were they?
One is 18, one is 22.
The camp officials are keen to help, but they have more urgent problems to worry about. The late arrival of medicines and bad sanitation has led to fears of epidemics of cholera, typhoid or malaria. And while Sikhs who are still living at home call regularly for news of relatives, many of those in the camps are still too fearful to list the names and addresses of missing Sikh relations.
They're very scared. They might not tell us, even if the person is there. They might not tell us that he is there, so it's going to require a lot of convincing that, look, we have come to help you.
Why is that? Why would they be scared?
Because they don't trust people after what they've been through.
It has to be compiled.
Volunteers at the People's Unity Committee are now compiling a list of the missing. With so many bodies burnt beyond recognition, it'll be the only way of determining who survived and who didn't. Already they've listed 1,500 names.
We're only trying to see the positive aspect so far. Later on, of course, it will be out that they're dead. But we're concentrating our energies into locating the missing people, because I think there's a ray of hope that this person might be alive. And the families are very, very anxious.
The only real hope that families will soon be reunited is if they return home. In the more sensitive areas, that prospect may be remote. Here, the